Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking at a really major development, September 5th, 2025. President Trump signed an executive order.
A pretty significant one.
Yeah, it gives the Department of Defense a secondary name, the Department of War.
Wow. So not just symbolic then?
Not at all. It's happening fast.
Yeah.
Defense.gov already redirects to war.gov.
Seriously, already?
Yep. And Secretary Pete Hegseth, he's now using the Secretary of War title. His handle on X is @SecWar.
Okay, so they're moving quickly.
They really are. Even changing door signs. The Public Affairs Briefing Room is becoming the Pentagon War Annex.
Huh. So this follows that push from Hegseth for a warrior ethos?
Exactly. It's a deliberate rebrand signaling, well, a more assertive stance for the U.S. military.
And it ties into something bigger, right? This isn't just about the name itself.
Correct. It's directly linked to a broader conservative defense strategy for fiscal year 2025. We're talking shifts in spending, global focus, even internal military culture.
Okay, lots to unpack there.
Right. So today, the Department of Defense becomes the Department of War. It feels like a fundamental shift in how America projects power.
Mm-hmm.
Let's dig into what this really means.
Good idea. Where do we start? The history.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
Because Department of War isn't new, is it? It has history.
Oh, absolutely. From 1789 all the way up to 1947, that was the name, for almost 160 years.
So why did it change back then, after World War II?
Well, President Truman, in 47, argued the focus needed to shift. He said military tasks should be directed not toward war, but toward peace.
Ah, okay. A post-war sentiment.
Exactly. The National Security Act created the framework, and by 1949, it was officially the Department of Defense. It reflected this hope, to avoid more conflict, especially with nuclear weapons now in the picture. It was about signaling defense, not offense.
Now, we're swinging back. What's the argument for bringing back war from the conservative side?
The core argument seems to be about clarity and strength. President Trump said the old name had a stronger sound, and he links it to, winning. His words were, as Department of War, we won everything. I think we're going to have to go back to that.
So projecting victory.
Yeah.
And that warrior ethos Secretary Hegseth talks about.
Yeah, that seems key for him. He's framing it as getting back to the military's main job. He said the change focuses on maximum lethality, not tepid legality, violent effect, not politically correct.
Strong words.
Very. It's about reestablishing what he calls that warrior ethos, fighting and winning without getting sidetracked by other things.
It's interesting, though, isn't it? Some people you wouldn't expect, like Ron Paul or Medea Benjamin, they sort of agree the name defense wasn't quite right, but for different reasons.
That's true. They argue the U.S. has basically been at war nearly constantly since World War II ended. So for them, calling it the Department of Defense felt like a charade.
Hiding the reality.
Kind of. They think calling it the Department of War might actually make people pay more attention, maybe reconsider the department's budget and actions. More honesty, in their view.
So for some conservatives, it's about rejecting political correctness, using plain language.
Exactly. They see euphemisms as unhelpful, even destructive, because they mask reality. It's about facing facts as they see it.
Okay, but this change isn't universally popular. There must be pushback.
Oh, definitely. First off, legally, an executive order gives a secondary name. A permanent change needs Congress.
Right. Has anyone tried that?
Yeah, Senator Mike Lee and Representative Greg Stube, both Republicans, have introduced bills. But getting that through Congress is another story.
And what about how this looks to the rest of the world?
That's a big concern for critics. Some national security experts worry it signals a more aggressive U.S., making warfare as an everyday function.
Making diplomacy harder.
Potentially, yeah. They argue defense sounds constructive, while war could make the U.S. look bellicose, maybe push allies away or make adversaries nervous. Or perhaps embolden them, depending on how you look at it.
And practically speaking, changing a name like that, it costs money.
Right. A lot. Estimates are in the millions, potentially billions, to update everything. Websites, signs, documents, you name it.
So critics are calling it
political theater, a waste of money that could go to, troops or equipment.
There was also a point about historical accuracy, wasn't there?
Right. The original Department of War was mainly the Army. The Department of Defense, created post-WWII, covers all branches, a unified command.
So going back to war doesn't quite fit the modern structure.
That's the argument. Critics say it misrepresents today's joint force.
Okay, let's pivot to the bigger picture this name change is part of. That conservative defense strategy for FY 2025.
Yeah.
What's the driving idea behind it?
It's built squarely on peace through strength. That's the motto. The Heritage Foundation's budget proposal, which informs this, prioritizes lethality.
And it takes aim at the previous administration's budget.
Directly, it calls the Biden administration's FY 2025 request insufficient and misaligned with current global threats.
So peace through strength means more spending.
Yep. It calls for about a 3% overall increase over the FY 2024 request. Compare that to the Biden plan's proposed 1% increase for FY 2025.
And is that gaining traction?
Well, the House did approve President Trump's requested trillion-dollar budget, so yes.
$1 trillion. Wow. But it's not just more money, it's how it's spent.
Right.
Reallocation.
Exactly. A key shift is moving funds from research and development RDT&E to procurement, buying stuff now.
Why that shift?
The concern, as laid out in the strategy, is that R&D budgets have grown while procurement sometimes gets cut. They point to examples like cuts to submarines or F-35s in recent requests while R&D went up. They see that as imbalanced.
So let's focus on future tech, more on weapons for today.
Sort of. It's shifting from what they call generalized or secondary R&D into buying existing ships, aircraft, and munitions. They want about $8 billion more just for munitions and $48 billion for shipbuilding, like 2 Virginia-class subs, 2 destroyers, 2 frigates.
And boosting the defense industry?
Right. Using things like multi-year contracts, block buys, to give manufacturers the confidence to really ramp up production, consistent demand.
What about cutting costs? Any fat to trim?
The strategy proposes $18.8 billion in cuts from defense-wide operations and maintenance and R&D. The idea is to push that money towards the actual military services for their procurement and operations.
Less bureaucracy, more warfighter focus.
That's the stated goal. It also advocates for no new DoD civilian employees and cuts to some civilian agencies.
Okay, so where is this strengthened military going to be focused geopolitically?
The number one focus is clearly China and the Indo-Pacific. The goal is stated as denying Chinese dominance and defending the U.S., which includes urgently boosting forces to deter any move against Taiwan.
Now, what actions are proposed?
More intel gathering on China, for sure. Ramping up production of long-range missiles, anti-ship, land attack, air-to-air, and arming Taiwan with asymmetric capabilities.
Asymmetric meaning?
Things like anti-ship missiles, drones, naval mines, cheaper weapons that can inflict serious damage on a larger force, making an invasion too costly. The Army would also deploy new land-based missiles like hypersonic weapons to hit ships from shore.
Is the U.S. doing this alone, or are allies expected to step up elsewhere?
Big emphasis on burden sharing. For Europe, the expectation is they take the lead on conventional defense against Russia, spend more like 2–3% of GDP, and lead Ukraine aid.
Freeing up U.S. resources for Asia.
That's the idea. Shift personnel and funds from Europe to the Indo-Pacific while still backing NATO. In the Middle East, partners like Israel and Gulf states are expected to lead against Iran, with U.S. arms and intel support.
And North Korea.
South Korea takes the lead there, with U.S. backing on missile defense and nuclear options.
Speaking of nuclear options, what's the plan for the U.S. arsenal?
It's a top priority. The strategy deems the current modernization program necessary but insufficient because adversaries are expanding theirs.
So build more.
Yes. It calls for a larger and more diversified nuclear arsenal, aiming for no fewer than 200 new deployable warheads by 2034, plus funding key programs, the new Sentinel ICBM, the Long-Range Standoff Missile, Columbia-class subs, the B-21 bomber, and bringing back the Nuclear Sea-Launched Cruise Missile, SLCM.
And defending against incoming missiles.
That gets a big chunk, too. $23.3 billion recommended for advanced multi-layered defenses against cruise and ballistic missiles from anyone, including major powers, developing the next-generation interceptor, maybe even space-based defenses eventually.
Okay, that covers the external strategy. What about inside the military? Internal reforms?
Yeah, this is a big piece, depoliticizing the DoD. The strategy calls for eliminating all DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives and positions. Same for climate change programs.
Why? What's the reasoning given?
They argue these are divisive and demoralizing, label them woke policies, and claim they hurt recruiting. The push is for gender-neutral fitness tests, political neutral officers, and refusing to fund abortions. Basically, a return to what they see as the military's sole focus, the combat mission.
Recruiting has been tough. How does this strategy address that and troop welfare?
It supports the proposed 4.5% pay raise, but it also specifically calls for $400 million shifted to fix family housing, citing really bad conditions, mold, pests, sewage,
Better housing as a retention tool.
and a moral obligation seems to be the argument. They contrast that need with spending on housing for illegal migrants. On recruiting itself, beyond removing the woke elements, they mention the challenge of obesity rates among young people and suggest focusing messages on service and duty, plus highlighting GI Bill education benefits.
So we have the Department of War, a budget focused on lethality, burden sharing, and internal cultural shifts aimed at depoliticization. It's a profound change in direction.
It really is a very different vision for America's military and its role.
Which leaves us with a final thought. With this shift from defense to war, and this drive for increased strength and focus, what does this new trajectory truly mean for America's place in the world? And, maybe even for the choices you listening might face down the line. What kind of future is being shaped here? Something to think about.